Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Indonesian Youth Democracy Forum IYDF virtual town hall with the theme of strengthening Indonesia democracy in the 21st century. My name is Dino, and I'm honored to be your master of ceremony for this event. Today's event is a collaboration between the Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, or FPCI, and Konrad Adenauer Stiftung Indonesia. First of all, we would like to welcome our honorable guest who is joining us today virtually. We have Dr. Dino Patijalal, founder and chairman of FPCI. We also have Dr. Dennis Swarsana, director of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung Indonesia. We also have 4 panelists who will give their valuable insight for today's town hall. Welcome Pak Bambang Harimurti, member of Board of Commissioner at PT Tempo Inti Media. We also have Abigail Limuria, co-founder What Is Up Indonesia. We also have Dr. Nyarwi Ahmad, Executive Director at the Indonesian Presidential Studies. And we also have Togi Pangaribuan, lawyer and activist, who also lecturer at the University of Indonesia. I also would like to welcome all great Indonesian youths who are part of IYDF delegates, and welcome to all of our partners who are joining us today. And to everyone who is joining online from our YouTube channel, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite Dr. Dino Patijalal, founder and chairman of FPCI, to give his opening remarks. Pak Dino, you may have the floor.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Pak,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Sorry, thank you very much. And on behalf of FPCI, I'd like to thank our partner, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, for working with us to organize this event. For FPCI, this year we have decided to advocate an important cause, which is democracy for youth, or youth democracy. I think the reason is that we have observed in Indonesia, and not just in Indonesia, but in other countries as well, the youth, they live in democracy, but they don't appreciate the how they got here in terms of democratic development, and as a result, when democracy is experiencing erosion, they're not aware of it and they don't defend it, right? For Indonesia, the key reason is that we became a democracy in 1998, 1999. That's 25 years ago. And if you were born after that, or significantly after that, you have no recollection of what it feels like to be protesting in the streets and risking your life for it. To be disagreeing with somebody and getting jailed for it, and to be restricted in what you say and what you do, right? So it's very important, I think, for our youth today to be the guardians of democracy, but they have to go beyond the rhetorical level. You know, it has to be beyond simply just saying, "Hey, we like freedom. You know, it's great to be free." Right? Democracy is much more complicated than that. You know, there are elements to democracy. There's the rule of law. There are stable institutions, freedom of expressions, freedom of organization, elections, free and fair elections, and so on and so on. Yeah. And there are times that elements of democracy may face erosion. And I think many countries are seeing what is called creeping authoritarianism. That is, the system doesn't crumble and there's no military coup, right? But the elements of democracy are experiencing erosion, creeping erosions. And I think it's very important for the youth to understand this, to understand that in order to live and preserve, to live in democracy, they have to defend it at all times. They have to speak up. And this is important because throughout Indonesia's history, whenever we have change, either it's a revolution for independence or the fight for democracy, the fight for human rights, the fight for development, the youth has always been at the forefront. They're always been the most progressive and the most reform-minded segment of society. And the moment they fight, they push the boundaries, that's the moment the nation change, right? So again, I would like to thank our partners, CAS, for working with us on this. I think this is not just an Indonesia problem, this is a global problem. Around the world, I think it's very important for all the youth to understand that the fate of democracy really depends on how they think about democracy, how they treat democracy, and how they defend democracy. And with that, I thank everybody and all the speakers who are here today. And I wish you a great discussions, and a particular hello to my good friend Dennis. Yeah, at CAS. Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Pak Dino, for your very insightful remarks. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Dennis Sorsana, Director of CAS Indonesia, to deliver his opening remarks.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Dino. I have to apologize first that my internet connection is very weak. I'm in Timor-Leste right now, and I've already checked with Jenny during the pre-talks, and my Zoom is currently quite frequently crashing. So I'm hoping that at least for these 2 minutes of my introductory words, everything's going to remain stable. And well, I'm in Timor-Leste, so this is just, I would say, the perfect background for my my introductory remarks, not just because Timor-Leste is by all means the most accomplished democracy in Southeast Asia, but also because it's a very young country. And what we are witnessing here while we're here in Timor-Leste right now as CAS is that a lot of young people, a huge part of this young generation in Timor-Leste is becoming more and more politically involved. There are new parties being founded by the youth in Timor-Leste, and they are very much fighting for their interests. And some of you might have heard that Timor-Leste has a very, let's say, bleak future, especially in economic terms, a huge youth unemployment. So there are many topics that the young people in Timor-Leste are working on and are fighting for politically. So I think that's a very good backdrop for my opening remarks, and also for this operation with Foreign Policy Community Indonesia, with FPCI, to support young people who are active in politics, who want to act more in the political field, and stand up for their interests, and especially here in the society in Indonesia. And I think, Dino, you mentioned the more systemic questions about the future of democracy. But I think also if we go a level below that, it has never been more important for young people to stand up for their interests and to get involved in politics and to get active in civil society and in politics as well, and political parties. And we have a lot of issues at stake. They might differ from country to country, from society to society, but I think one of the overarching topic, of course, is climate change. And there's decisions that are being made currently, or even that are not being made currently, that are above all impacting the younger generation, while the younger generation has only a very limited say in how these decisions are made. and they are made by an older generation that might not be impacted in the same way that the younger generation is, and they are, at least to a certain extent, also this differs from country to country, taking decisions that are more in their immediate interest, but are running very much against the interest of the younger generations, who will have to live with the consequences in the future. So this is where we are right now. This is the situation I think that the younger generation all over the world is right now, and therefore I think it's a very timely and very important initiative by FPCI to start this program. I'm very much thankful to Dino and to all of the team at FPCI for organizing this event, as this is the very first time that we are cooperating with FPCI and CAS. And also, as I said, it's a global phenomenon. That's also something that Dino has mentioned. It's not just limited to Indonesia, so we are very happy that we can welcome some German students as well, both today at this online event, but also in October at our event in Jakarta. Were selected by CAS to take part in this. Now we're down to 3 because of personal reasons of 2 of them, but they are all 3, I think, outstanding, not just outstanding students. Actually, I don't know much about their studies, but they're outstanding young people, outstanding representatives of their generation, very active in different fields, societal fields, and different political fields. And they're also, of course, scholarship holders of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung in Germany. So we are very happy to have them. And I think by this, we can also strengthen the youth exchange between Indonesia and Timor-Leste. And I think that, or at least I hope, but I'm also very optimistic that it's going to be very fruitful and very interesting to all of you, to all of us. And I very much hope that you all will take something out of this. And I'm very much looking forward to this discussion today, and also to our in-person event on the 6th of October, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you very much. And well, I wish us all a very interesting seminar today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis, for your remarks. And we really appreciate your presence and support for this event. Now, I would like to hand the floor to Jenny, our moderator today, for the moderator discussion. Jenny, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dito. Good afternoon from Jakarta, everyone. Jenny here from FPCI. I will be moderating today's discussion. So today's discussion will be interactive. We'll have a town hall format, in which later on we'll hear also from the German youth giving their insights, and from Indonesian youth as well. But we're happy that today we are joined by 4 great figures in Indonesia. We have Pak Bambang, we have Abigail, we have Pak Togi, and later Pak Nyarwi will join a bit later. Yeah, so it's an important topic that we're discussing here. So to set up the scene, I think it is only fair if we understand first, try to understand why are we talking about democracy in the first place, and why is it so important for us to bring the discourse up? The general public are watching here. Many of them are the youth. So I'll have 2 speakers from different generation later, Abigail and Pak Bambang, to answer this question. But first, I want to give the question to Abigail. Abigail, youth like you and me, we might think that life is going all right. Our country is doing not bad, and all I care about is food on the table. I get to play my social media freely, and I can hang out with my friends. You know, why do we need to talk about democracy? Actually, why do we need to bring this discourse up on the table? Abigail, you may have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Jenny, for the questions. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. So why do we need to talk about democracy as youth? I think, like Jenny mentioned, I think us as youth in general, and maybe specifically in Indonesia, we have enjoyed many privileges that come with living in a country that is democratic, right? And sometimes we forget that these things are not given, but rather we need to preserve and continuously fight for it, especially given the global trend of the democratic backsliding and many other concerning trends. And I think as youth, we need to remember that in 2024, the election we're about to have, it's only our fifth election. So it's only the fifth election in which Indonesia, we elect directly who our president will be. And so we need to remember that the country is pretty much still getting used to election campaigns and democracy. And so that's why we need to talk about in the democracy, so that first we remember that if we know what's at stake, and if we know that we can have yet another transition of power, another election, if we get it right and it's peaceful, it will further entrench the idea in many skeptical minds in Indonesia that democracy is indeed the best system of government for Indonesia specifically. And so because we're still getting used to it, I think we need a lot of examples to convince people that democracy is worth fighting for. And then second, I think we just have to talk about democracy because we need to be proactive, in protecting what's good and improving what needs to be better. And we need to be properly informed to know which is which, as youth especially, for the general public, whether it be cross-country or in Indonesia.
Thank you, Abigail. Nice way to start. Now I go to Pak Bambang. Pak Bambang, you have been observing Indonesia ever since the New Order, the beginning of the Reformasi. Do you see intergenerational gap, your generation and my generation, the gap of understanding democracy and taking it seriously? What's your observation, Pak Bambang?
Yes, thank you very much. Of course, I think we have a different way of looking at it, because people from my generation, we already experience living without democracy, which is a much harder than now. Yeah, but my son and my daughter, they are living in relatively much freer situation, so they can speak freely, and they can do whatever they want, which in my day, when I was in their age, might cause me to be jailed without any trial. So of course, this is a different, and that's why for me it's a very good music to hear Abigail Limura. Her generation is thinking seriously how to preserve democracy, because if we lose democracy, to get it back, it's much more difficult. And many people don't realize this is our third time trying to be democracies. We were democracies in the early 50s, and then we lost it. And then in 66, we are also quite democratic for a brief period of time. And then slowly we are losing it. And if I can share a little bit of screens here, I want to also share with you. Oh, not there, yeah. Oh, it's.
You may try again, Pak Bambang. I think
yeah?
You may try again. I think you're.
Okay, I'll try it again. It's not there. Let me check. Because if we look now, we are slowly declining, and I'm afraid we are, we are like a frog in boiling water. It is slowly getting hot and hot without realizing it, because we are too comfortable, and then suddenly we were already too burned to get out. Here, maybe okay. Here is even an index democracy by the government of Indonesia, by Bappenas, realized that our health of democracy is declining. Yeah, if you look at even here, Freedom House, in the year of 2006 to 2013, we were able to become a free country. But since 2014 and up to now, as you can see up to now, we are declining. And if I go back to this and look at in which part are we declining, if you look at the freedom rating, they use it into three style, yeah, freedom rating, political rights, and civil liberties. The thing that getting much worse is the civil liberties. Yeah, we have problem maybe tolerating the Ahmadiyya, the LGBT. This come from the public, from civil society itself, and then they force the government to abide by them. Yeah, in political rights, actually, we remain basically the same. Political right is still okay. Freedom rating is a little bit getting worse, but the most getting worse is civil liberties, and we have to watch of this, because when you're talking about civil liberties, the enemy is us, not Suharto in the old days, yeah, because the enemies is our conservative societies. So this is a much more difficult thing to handle, and it's not going like, you know, suddenly there is a military coup like Pak Dino says, but this is more like suddenly more and more region, you know, not allowing Ahmadiyya, for instance, to practice, and more areas suddenly says, you know, you if you are LGBT, you are not welcome here. So this is tough, and this is a kind of struggle, I think, in Jenny's generation, born the struggle, ya. If my Christian friend call it the salib yang dipanggul ini, ya, the cross to bear, is how to convince mostly our own civil society the need to be more democratic, to respect human rights. This is a challenge for the younger generation. I think how do I go back to stop share? Okay. Yeah, I think I'll set it up to that.
Thank you, Pak Bambang. Thank you also for the graph you have prepared. It's good to know that you also said about if we lose it, it's hard to get it back. But now the forms of the threats is different. It's no longer like what we had back then. I want to go to Pak Togi. Pak Bambang talk about how it's no longer about the military rule we're worrying, but maybe more on it's more implicit in a way. And you are a lawyer, you are experienced in this case. How do you observe, what's your observation on the lawmaking world inside it, in the legislation, in the legislative process? Do you see a threat to democracy that is creeping in Indonesia? Not only talking about threat of authoritarianism that is creeping in Indonesia, but also on the laws that are considered as not representing people's will in a way. It could be a law that is just benefiting a certain parties. It could be laws that are just, let's say, quote unquote nonsense. Pak Togi, please give your observation on this.
Hi, Jenny. Thanks. So first of all, I'd like to thank the FPCI, Pak Dino, and CAS, Pak Dennis, for the invite. It's such an honor to be here today to share this panel with such distinguished panelists, such as Pak and Abigail and everyone here. So there's a couple of layers to your question, Mike. So the first one, I think it's issues of public participation in legislative drafting, in lawmaking. And the second issue is about who is actually benefiting if we were to assume that the legislative making is flawed. So I'll turn to the first issue first. If we look at indexes and data, especially if we look at the report the final report from the legal reform team, of which Pak BHM is a member of, I think it's very clear that there is an issue of public participation in the legislative process in Indonesia. In the final report of the legal reform team, there is a specific section on the need to have a certain standard or a certain threshold to say that public participation has been met. If we look at the issue of the job creation law and its challenge in the Constitutional Court, the main issue being considered there and what then resulted in the job creation law being declared partially unconstitutional is the lack of public participation. Now, if we also compare this with the State Development Minister's Legal Development Index in 2021, I believe the 2022 version is to be issued sometime soon, probably this month or at least early next month. There is a data there that shows two interesting things. The first one is that the National Legislative Priority Program, under that survey, under that research, again by the State Development Ministry, is concluded to not be in line with the with the public need. That's the first issue. The second issue is that there is a number there that more than 91% of society feels left out in legislative drafting and lawmaking. So I think that's the first layer of your question. Is there a decrease in public participation? I think the answer here is a resounding yes. We can continue on this topic by asking questions such as, is there an impact of the omnibus law methodology in legislative drafting, which is, again, also an issue that has been raised by the legal reform team. They suggested a limitation on the sector and process of the omnibus law methodology. Now, on your second topic, on the beneficiary, and you've impliedly asked issues on political parties or certain groups of society. I think if we go back to that data, meaning that more than 91% of society feels left out in legislative drafting, I think we can look at not only political parties, but studies have also shown that interest groups, the certain industries have a way to influence political parties and their representatives in legislative drafting. Because if you take out public participation, then basically the authority to create a law is within the legislative body itself, in coordination with the government, of course. Under our constitution, the legislative body is self-explanatory. It has the authorities to create laws. So I think, again, another issue, on this issue, we can extend it to liability and responsibility of political parties. But answering your question directly, yes, there is a stark issue of public participation in legislative drafting in Indonesia. Jenny?
Thank you, Pak Togi. Now, I want to touch upon what you said as 91% feel left out in the policy making, in the lawmaking inside the process. Now, in democracy itself, we know that it is about us, the people, choosing the people that are trusted to lead us and to create this and formulate this law. And that's the essence, to choose the best that we think can be trusted. But now we see a lot of worries clouding the people, such as money politics, that's first. And second, patron-client, and then populism. So how far have these three things have distorted the purpose of democracy itself? I want to ask this to Pak Bambang. When it's not just about the process, like Pak Togi mentioned about the process of the lawmaking, but the people themselves, are they actually people's choice? And again, the worries that are clouding the people, Pak Bambang.
Yeah. Thank
Sorry,
you.
sorry.
Let me.
Sorry, Pak Bambang, just
Yeah.
one point on that. I think also it'd be interesting as well to hear Abigail's thoughts because yes, we elect the people, but the way our system works is that we don't have a by one person, one vote system in parliament. It's a faction system. So the party actually votes. So it's block voting. So I think this is interesting with what Abigail has done with Bijak Memilih, that it provides a track record, a voting track record of each faction. So I think it'll be interesting as well to hear Abigail's thoughts on this. Apologies, Pak Bambang.
No
Please.
problem. Okay, let me. Oh, Abigail, you want to speak first?
No, Pak Bambang, I think you should go first.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to share. I think this one, yeah. About the money politics here. This is just to show you that the decline democracy not only happening here, but it's all over the world. And I found a lot of books on it, and even the first book about the decline of democracy in the 50s already written by the famous, the late Herbert White. But here is my worry about the decline of democracy. This is a graph I'm taking from the World Bank book, The Right to Tell. Yeah, if you look at countries, how many countries into 4 different groups: high income countries, middle up income countries, middle low income countries, and very low income countries. You see that 85% of high income countries basically democracy with freedom of the press. Yeah. So maybe only 15% of countries that is high income but doesn't have a free press. Maybe China and Singapore. Oh no, I think China is probably in high middle income because this is per capita income, not based on GDP. And if you move into middle up income countries, 40% have freedom of the press. And then if you, that means having democracies. You go to middle and low, is about 35% maybe. And if you go to the very low country, only very small number of poor countries have freedom of the press. So there is clearly a very strong correlation between democracy and freedom of the press and the high income of countries or lower income of countries. And of course, the question is whether you should become rich first, then you have freedom of the press, or is it because you have freedom of the press, then you can become richer. So the World Bank has another study, and you look at this various countries where they try to find the correlation between freedom of the press and the health of countries. And if you know a little bit about statistics, you know this is clearly a very strong correlative. Yeah, this is not done by expert in politics, but by economists. So they just look at numbers. And here's a problem of our democracy. Why our democracy is captured by oligarchy? Pak Togi knows. You know, I've been working in our parliament. Our parliament is actually useless because our member of parliament cannot do anything that is critical of what the political leadership stated, as Pak Togi says, is a block. Yeah. So if you want to change a law, for instance, don't waste your time going to our DPR and talk to our DPR member. Just made an appointment with the chair of the party, because there is only if you can get 4 of biggest parties chairs, basically you done it. Yeah, because nobody in the parliament will dare to go against you, and this cause problem because so the power is in the political party leaders, but the problem in Indonesia, if Mbak Yeni is political leaders, there is an expectation that you finance the political parties. Yeah. And then, of course, if you have to finance your own political party, then you have to go fundraising. And if you want to go fundraising, of course, then you go fundraising to the one who can give you a lot of money in a shortest time. So that's more efficient transaction. And therefore, here is a problem. Then our democracy is captured by the super rich. Yeah, the what you call it, the oligarchies. But this is not the fault of the oligarchy. This is our fault, because we don't want to give enough funding for our political parties to be independent. Then they have to find their own money. Then they got trapped into the oligarchies. There is a saying in management: if you pay peanut, you get monkeys. Because you give peanut to the political parties, then you get monkeys political parties. And monkeys that is, and the problem is, because of that, then we have this problem. Yeah, next year we have election, and you can be ensured almost all the candidates that will be elected is either they themselves are super rich, or they are friends of super rich, or even worse, the stooges of super rich, because they need to spend a lot of money to become candidates. So, since this is actually a very simple problem, the solution is actually to ensure anyone, if Jenny want to become a member of parliament, you don't have to spend 5 billion rupiah, for instance, because who can spend 5 billion rupiah, in Indonesia? You don't have to spend like in especially in North European countries. My friend there becoming parliament members or even minister or mayor, they don't even have to spend their own money at all, because the political parties look at them. They are very good candidates for the political parties because of the vision and everything. So then they support them. So this is so how to kill the oligarchies is by making our political parties financially independent. This is also happened in media. The reason Tempo can become independent is because we are financially independent. We are not owned by any oligarchies. Basically, it's a public company, and also by foundation whose interest is not for profit, but just so that Tempo can be free. So this is a very important thing to understand. And I want to give you just the number, because just a fact, yeah. In 2017, the Indonesian LIPI, which is the Indonesian Academic of Science, in cooperation with the KPK, which is our anti-corruption agency, did a survey. How much should we give our political parties so they are financially independent? And they come up with the number is about 27,000 rupiah per voters per year. And that is 2017. So I think right now, if you want to be generous, you should give around 50,000 rupiah per voters per year. So they are not only financially independent, but they also can do good programs like in Germany or in Northern Europe. Yeah. So, and you know how much do the government give now to political parties? It's only 2,500. And this is already a big increase compared to a year ago, which is 1,000 rupiah. And some years ago, 100 rupiah. So this is our problem. You give peanut, you get monkey. You don't make your political parties independent, then you get oligarchies. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Bambang. What an interesting analogy you put there with the monkey. Want to go to Abigail. Abigail, I'd like to invite you to respond to this, and with additional question also, want to talk about political literacy in Indonesia. And we know we are entering deeper to the digital world. social media and the information realm, sometimes digital literacy also translates to political literacy in Indonesia today with this new era. With your initiative in Bijak Memilih in What Is Up Indonesia, how do you think, how well equipped is our nation today, do you think, in terms of political literacy? And what's our role as youth, as simple as that? Because it's not just the government's efforts, but also how can we make our wisest decision in choosing and also in observing politics? And I want to acknowledge Pak Nyarwi who is joining. I'll go to you after Abigail.
Okay, thank you. So maybe I won't comment a lot about like the systemic problem of political party. I think Pak Bambang already did an excellent job at that. So maybe I'll comment a little bit about what Bijak Memilih is trying to do. So I do acknowledge there's a lot of problems with how politics works in Indonesia, and I think Pak Bambang has nailed the core, one of the core problems very beautifully. But so even though in Indonesia we are electing candidates, ultimately those candidates are being appointed by political parties, and even when they enter the government, their votes, even though technically it should be one person, one vote, they still vote within a coalition, and it's still being influenced by their political party's agenda and ideology. And so there has been a few platforms that profiles the future candidates that will run for the election. But I think as of now, Bijak Memilih is the only platform that I know of that focuses on the political party as opposed to the candidates. And so in Bijak Memilih, if anyone's here interested, you can go to bijakmemilih.id. And for those of you who doesn't speak Indonesia, Bijak Memilih translates to vote wisely. So there we provide information about all the different Indonesian political parties that will run for the 2024 election. There you can find their different ideologies. So there's an ideological spectrum. There's a ratio of how many of their candidates are male versus female. And there's the age group. There are many track records, including their voting history, and so their stances on many various issues, and also their corruption track record that's already available for public. And also the candidates that will run from that political party that has previously been an ex-convict. And so we have all that in our website. And so the idea is that we want to democratize political education so that voters can see as transparently as we can provide information, the difference of track record and stances of the many political parties in Indonesia. Because I think one of the main problems for a lot of young people in voting is that there's both information overload and they have no idea where to look for information because there's just so many different political parties and they are barely distinguishable from one another. And so that's what we're trying to do. So we're trying to democratize political education through Bijak Memilih, especially in regards to the 2024 election. And more broadly, a more broad political education, we are also trying to make it more accessible through What Is Up Indonesia. And so in relation to your next question, so it's about political education and literacy, right? I think it's very interesting. So there's a survey that asks young people of Indonesia, do they care about public issues? So public issues meaning like education, climate change, corruption, air pollution, and more than 80% said that they care, meaning they're concerned, they want things to be better, and they are thinking about those public issues. But then when asked, how many of you are politically engaged? Only 8% said that they're politically engaged. And so there's obviously a gap between them being concerned about public issues and them being politically engaged. So it seems like there's a knowledge gap that maybe inform them that, oh, for you to tackle and to make these public issues better, one of the most effective way is for you to be politically engaged. And so that's what we're trying to bridge in What is Up Indonesia and in Bijak Memilih, to connect the dot between, if you want public issues to be better, the political system needs to be better. And one of the ways for us to drive that change is for us to reach a critical mass, a demand that wants our political system to be based more on issues, to care more about, to take issues more seriously, basically. And so I think, again, referring back to my previous point, I think as a democratic country, Indonesia is still very much young. And so I think we still have a lot to learn. We are still progressing. We are still learning about truth telling, about critical thinking, about how to assess our history and our condition now as it is, soberly. And I'm seeing a lot of efforts and initiative that's trying to bridge those knowledge gaps. And so I think we're not there yet, but we're progressing in a much hopeful way.
Thank you, Abigail. Last time we had a discussion among the delegates of Indonesian Youth Democracy Forum, and a couple of times we brought up about your platform in Bijak Memilih, and I myself use that as well. So it's a really great job that you are doing there. So I admire that work. Pak Nyarwi Ahmad, I want to acknowledge you. Thank you for joining us despite your busyness. I want to throw you a question, just like what I throw to Pak Bambang earlier, but this time with a different way. Simple, Pak Nyarwi. How fair do you think our election is today? By fair, it does not mean only technical wise, the conduct of the votes, but also, maintaining the quality, meritocracy. In a way, we choose the capable leaders that are of people choice, that are based on democratic values, and in this case, not only the executive leaders but also the legislative sides. Please, Pak Nyarwi.
This is a really tricky question, Jenny. First of all, I say thank you for inviting me on this session. I will answer this question. I think that actually the election not fair yet in terms of the value of democracy that we try to propose in an ideal way. Like, for example, like this, when we are expected that the citizen should be capable, when we are talking about democracy, meaning, say, for example, using the reference from Abraham Lincoln, democracy, government from the people, by the people and for the people, for example. And I think it is too far when we are talking how the people have power to determine their leader. The value that actually the people expect to represent their idea. For example, like this, there is some barrier that make democracy in Indonesia not fair yet. In terms of political party system, Pak Bambang Harimurti already said that there is some oligarch that really dominant in Indonesian politics. The political party that really set up by the people, I think it's a small number. That's even some political party established by social political organization. They are also the elite there. I mean, like dynasty, political group of dynasty there. So common ordinary people, it's quite hard to get a position as a leader or even a presidential candidate or governor or thing. Even there is new progress as well. That's common people also can be nominated as leader, executive or legislative body of government during the election, running for election. But they actually, for journalists and journalists like Mas Bambang Harimurti, I think know well that most of them rely on oligarch during the campaign. Including we hear so much about there are political volunteer or campaign volunteer, but who finance those volunteers? Where the money come from? For example, we heard that there are some rich politicians that taking part in mobilizing those financial resources to support this candidate. But that's why even so many actually talented leader in this country, but only few of them that really have opportunity to have opportunity as the leader that have chance to get the better political stage or political opportunity, like to get elected as governor, then as a president or vice president, like the story of Jokowi. I think Jokowi as ordinary people is I really doubt this. How can ordinary citizen in Indonesia can be elected and get so many endorsements? Like, no, Jokowi also successfully built political dynasty in this country as well, and most of the politicians tend to be the network of dynasty and the network of oligarch as well. So in election, in terms of election system, some said that it's quite fair because we have already democratic election system as only rule of the game in this country. Direct election, people have equal opportunity to vote the candidate, party candidate, but people have no right and have no power actually to nominate who can be nominated as a party candidate in the parliament election or in the president, even in the presidential election, because the power of people, I mean the top leader of the party on those who finance the party, I think they are really, powerful to determine those things. So including the media, when we are talking about fair election, fair principle in democracy, everyone actually have a similar opportunity to take part in discussing politics. We in social media era right now have so many issues regarding buzzer, political buzzer. So the opinion being spun by some professional anonymous account, and then they could making a name characterization to those who are, for example, a group as being labeled as opposition, or the hater of the government, or the hater of. It's quite easy to label them as the hater when we criticize the institution or the leader. Not only president, even minister, then there are some group of political buzz attacking our account, and then so how can we say this is a fair democratic principle that really visible in this country? When we are talking in the academia sphere, we quite easy to discussing this thing, but when we are talking in mass media mainstream like television, there is some editorial restriction. I've been invited so many times as political commentator. Then the senior editor also asked me, Mas Bambang, I think really know well about this thing. Mas, please don't say about this because this very sensitive. Okay, I'm not saying about this. This is I think we be encountering this problem. But overall, Jenny, I'm really grateful that this country still survive as a democratic country, because even with some restriction, there is not fully freedom. That's why, like Freedom House categorized this country as not fully democratic, party democratic. So I think this categorization of this label is quite right. But how can we strengthen the question? Actually, how can we strengthen our democracy? So this theme or this discussion, the theme of discussion is quite interesting, because as youth community, I think we need to build. I write an article about liberal democratic epistemic community, like Abigail that develop a startup or application that bijak memilih. I think it is part of an effort for the each community as to develop their self or to organize themselves as an epistemic liberal democracy, because even some established political party such as PDIP and Golkar, and they quite sensitive when talking about liberal democratic principle. They always said Pancasila democracy or sepak bola democracy. So there is no winner and the loser. So in this country, we need to organize a youth community, many diverse group youth community to be part of epistemic community to support the first or to support the element of democracy. The first thing is the people, educate the people. We need to educate the people, make it politically literate, and protect them from, if possible, protect them from the disinformation. And right now, there is also, I write an article about algorithmic disinformation as a propaganda. So this is like in political communication. So one of the phrase, it is no longer what or who get to say, but who get lost in this social media era. And so many people did not yet consider that they actually get lost with so many disinformation and so many things that I think we need to help them to consider that. I think as part of the epistemic liberal democracy, we need to organize ourselves to be a stronger community or agent. So this is the first one: educate the people, making the people more politically literate. And the second one, also help the mainstream media to be more independent, and also independent in terms of from the state intervention, and including capital intervention. And to so it's quite hard because how the media survive. I think even middle class sometimes have no habit to pay the quality of quality journalism to support like for example Tempo by buying monthly, Tempo for Kompas or some of the I think excellent media to be clearing house of so many problems of this country and to be independent and stronger political agent. And then the third is I think we need to criticize and even continue to making some criticism and also making some advice if possible to help political party in terms of how political party to be more independent financially and not being really depend on the oligarch or political dynasty. But it is quite complex and serious problem in this country. I don't know how to solve this problem, but we need to try to resolve those things within the next couple of years, because without revive capability of a political party as democratic institution that serve the people interest, I think it is impossible to strengthen our democracy. It starts from the political party institution and also leadership in this party, and then we can move to the next agenda if we can develop or we can start from those three agenda. I think that's all. Jenny, thank you so much.
Thank you, Pak Nyarwi. Thank you, Pak Nyarwi. Somehow it connects to what Pak Bambang said. Perhaps for people to have power to nominate, that it means a 50K per vote. Yeah, Pak Bambang. Maybe in the future. Yeah, but later we'll hear from the German delegations as well, and they have a unique system. Perhaps we can get some insight from them. But before we open the round for some insights from the German youth, I want to ask Pak Togi. Pak, please talk about freedom of expression in Indonesia, and also particularly out of curiosity as well, what do you think UU ITE means for Indonesia's democracy?
Well, thanks. And I think this is also a topic that Bambang is very well versed of, given his experience and position in the industry. But I think from what has been discussed, I think it's fair to say that from various indicias that the freedom of speech in Indonesia is declining, right? And I think one of the contributing factors to that is the information and electronic transaction law, especially specifically issues on electronic defamation. There's also, and I think this is going back to our earlier discussion, that I think now more and more we see that there is a deviation of how the law is used. I think our founding father, Sukarno, famously said, law is not a tool of oppression, but it's a tool of protection. So I think more and more there is a tendency for the law to be used to oppress. And in different scenarios, the one being oppressed and the one oppressing is different depending on the scenarios. But specifically on the issue of the ITE law, I think one important thing to note is that even though last year there has been a memorandum of understanding signed by all the legal officers and the relevant ministries on how to interpret the ITE law, especially on electronic defamation, I think this has relatively gone unnoticed and unenforced, meaning that we still see day to day there are issues, especially in regions outside Java, of the misuse of the ITE law to oppress freedom of speech. Again, this has also been noted specifically in the legal reform team's notes, that there needs to be a limitation. Specifically, there needs to be an amendment to the ITE law for it to not be used to oppress or attack free speech. Of course, we can also expand this discussion on the enactment of the new penal code in 2026, right, whereby it incorporates certain issues in the ITE law in the new penal code, and it reactivates defamation to state heads, in this case, the president, right? Even though they've categorized it into an act that needs to be reported. But again, the fact that they've reactivated this case, I think might extend this discussion and debate come 2026. Jenny?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pak Togi. There are a lot more that we want to talk about on that aspect. And interesting also to bring up about buzzer things later on. But I'd like to open the floor first for our German youth who are joining us here already today. We have Tom Schliesing and also from Alice Jacobi. And I want to give the floor first to Tom. He's a scholar and also PhD candidate in economics and specializing in researching the interplay between environmental degradation, development, and health. Tom, could you give your insights on democracy in German and what lessons or views that we can discuss together as both?
Yeah, of course. So first of all, thank you for having me here. It's a great honor to discuss with you. And what I heard so far really matches up a lot about issues we also face in Germany, maybe to another extent, maybe in a different, slightly different way. But overall, I can agree with a lot of issues that you mentioned that we have to face in the future. So especially in the beginning, you all mentioned that the youth does not appreciate democracy anymore. I'm not sure whether I would go along with that 100% in Germany. However, especially in the east of Germany, where my parents are from, I'm born in Bavaria, my parents are from the east, so I have like this east-west view very inside of me. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with the German history, but the East has been a social republic and not free until the 90s, so quite until the same time frame as Indonesia. And I think there the democracy is also not as much in the head of the people as in West Germany. So we face this geographical split in Germany. And I think you also have something very similar in Indonesia with Free Aceh movement, Kalimantan, and Papua unification. So I think we have really similar issues in that perspective. And I would love to hear more about that maybe from you in the upcoming discussion, what you think these movements can maybe also impact the future of Indonesia, because in Germany, we really see that the right-wing governments or the right-wing parties in the East gain more and more popularity. So, but overall, I think that in Germany, the youth is still very active, even though during COVID, it definitely took a hit. However, I think in Germany, especially when it comes to environmental issues, the youth is really active, however, not always in the most democratic sense. What I mean by this is that also because of social media and movements on social media, we kind of get into ideology bubbles. That's also something that was mentioned already. These algorithms that feed us the information we want to hear, the ideas we are already familiar with and that sound good to us. So I think that's really an issue. And also there we come to digital literacy that really needs to be worked upon also in Germany. So we have a really similar issue there. Another big topic that was discussed today was oligarchs. I don't see that big of a problem when it comes to oligarchs in Germany. Probably money always helps when you go into politics. Having rich friends is definitely not a bad idea, but I don't think that this is the driving factor for being successful in politics in Germany. So that's definitely a good point. One point I was missing, and when we had this little discussion before, I already mentioned it, is the environment. That came really short, in my opinion, because we have not only climate change. In Indonesia, we face a much bigger threat right now, which is air pollution. Jakarta has recently been nominated as the most polluted city on Earth. And I think your president, Widodo himself, has respiratory issues currently. So he is one of roughly 1 million people in Indonesia who face real health issues because of air pollution. And you also have problems with water pollution. Stuff that Germany has faced too in its current history, but not to that extent. And I think as air pollution and free air is a really vital resource for us humans, and if resources get closer and narrower, there is always conflict involved. So I would like to know your opinion on how environmental issues will also impact democracy in Indonesia, because in Germany it definitely does. The youth goes to the streets because of environmental issues. What is your view on that in Indonesia?
Thank you, Tom. This question, I'd like to give it to Abigail later on, but I want to hear from Alice first, because I think environment indeed is one of the issues that really reflects the public's needs and public's urgency. And somehow how we get to pass the right regulations and policies have to do with our democratic system as well. Alice Jacobi, I want to introduce you briefly first. She's a chairwoman of the Women's Union and also works at the European Parliament. Alice, you may give your insights.
Hello, again, and thank you very much for the introduction. Actually, I very much admire you for the organization of this event. Strengthening Indonesia's democracy. I mean, we have the same struggles in Germany. That's what I realized by the talking now, but democracy is always hard work. So I think it's very admirable that you are doing this conference. You're trying to find the solutions for some of the biggest issues, because we have to work for democracy a lot. At first, I was thinking about this party finance thing, because I'm actually just in the middle of an election campaign myself. I'm living in Hessen, that's a small county in Germany, and we are having county elections in October this year. What we realized is that if you want to find volunteers for political work, it's not allowed to cost a lot, because of course you'll only get volunteers if they think they can reach something by their work. So you have to kind of make them believe in the worthiness of their work, output-wise. On the other hand, it's not supposed to cost anything. So like things like transportation or food while you're doing voluntary work, all this has to be covered. You won't find volunteers if they have to pay for what they're doing. So looking at party financing, Bambang, you said that we in Europe that we are maybe a bit further along. Not so much, I'm afraid, because in our party here in Kassel, actually our candidate had to finance his own election campaign, and he did not know this beforehand. So he was voted to be the candidate of our party, and after that he realized that he would have to find his own funding. And that's a real struggle. It's not easy, especially because big companies in Germany, for instance, they tend to try to stay out of politics. They feel like politics is something dirty, not to get involved in, especially party politics. But this is dangerous because parties, also in Germany, are dependent on a civil society that supports them, volunteering, working for the politics, but also financing, of course. So yeah, maybe Germany is not better in every case. And I also think we can look at party funding in Germany as well, because we are struggling with that here, at least in our local community too. Looking at digitization, which is also very important for the youth. And here I was very interested to hear about you, Abigail, what you had to propose. That was very, very interesting. I see maybe 3 main issues when we look into digitization and its importance for democracy. The first is data protection. How can the data of people be protected from companies or political parties or any political interest groups to be used? Then micro-targeting. How can we establish also in the digital platforms groups and environments where people are still in exchange with other people and not staying in their own bubbles of opinions? And the final thing is freedom of speech. And here I would say maybe also 2 issues in the European debate. One is hate speech, being how far can you go in the digital sphere with talking about sensitive issues, also being aggressive towards politicians. This is one part of freedom of speech, and the other one is misinformation. How can you prevent platforms to just spread information that are wrong? How can you look at political advertising, making sure that certain information come from certain political parties? This all needs to be declared or to be transparent for the people reading of that. The last issue I'll just try to mention very briefly to the end is talking about the environment, especially for the youth. I think environmental issues are important because obviously we are the ones who have to live on this earth for another century or so. But actually there was a very interesting verdict of the Bundesverfassungsgericht, that's the German Federal Constitutional Court, and regarding climate change. And it said that German politics must find sufficient and adequate means to fight climate change for environmental protection to ensure the political freedom of the future generations, meaning that anything in climate change that we do not do now will have to invest even further resources in the future. And this will decrease the political freedom of future generations. And especially from a young perspective, I find this really interesting because it's our political freedom in the future, in the next 10 or 20 years, that is going to be restricted because we have to invest more and more into fighting climate change. And therefore we cannot invest as much in other important issues like education. So yeah, the German Federal Court ruled that actually politics must do things now, not to decrease the freedom of the future generations.
Thank you, Alice. Now I'll go to Abigail to respond, and then I want to invite Pak Bambang also. Abigail, you may have the floor.
Okay, so I think there's a little bit, there's multiple points that you would like me to respond to. So the first one, I think it's about environmental issue and how it will impact democracy in Indonesia by Tom. I think you're absolutely right in saying that Indonesia's air pollution, especially the ones in Jakarta, is terrible. However, this is actually not new. This has been a prevailing issue for a long time. However, I think it has been exacerbated by the current weather and with the increase of technology so that people can monitor their air quality in real time. And so this is not a new issue. However, I do acknowledge that there seems to be a tipping point of people's awareness, hence creating what we call a policy window. And especially this happens near the 2024 election. And so I think looking at people's awareness, there seems to be an increasing amount of demand. And therefore, since there's a moment of plasticity nearing the election, I have been hearing candidates campaigning and speaking about air pollution and climate change issue more specifically. And that has been a massive improvement, by the way, that since our previous election, which from my recollection, I never heard any candidates mentioning any climate or any environmental issues. But now it seems to be one of the hot topics. So it is, if we are being optimistic, it seems that there's a policy window, there's a critical mass that has been reached in the public's understanding. And because this problem has been going on for a while, there has been multiple stakeholders, non-governmental organization that policy expert that has been cooking policy and solutions that they are trying to offer to the government. And so hopefully after the 2024 election cycle, and once Indonesia gains its new leader, the new leader will take the environmental issue properly and that they will implement those policy through this policy window. Because I think there's a political brownie points to be gained by tackling environmental issues. So that's like a very good hope that I have on how the environmental issue will impact the democracy vice versa. And then for Alice, I think you mentioned about data protection of users. So the platform that me and my team made, Bijak Memilih, we actually don't gather any user data. So there's actually no data for us to protect. All we do is we compile all of our research and we put them in one platform. So I think what the necessary context to be had in Indonesia is that I think there's like 15 or 16 political parties that is running. And so there's so many different political parties and a lot, as I think Pak Bambang mentioned earlier, a lot of mainstream media are actually in Indonesia are owned by political leaders themselves. And so a lot of people are very confused on how to find credible, accurate information. That's the first thing. And then the second one, not everyone has time to do proper research for that many political parties and candidates. And so we we did the research for them. We compiled it in a very user-friendly UI UX interface. We leverage tech. We have like personality quiz for you to understand what issue matters most to you. And then we offer you like, also, this is how you could start. And then you can see which political party align with those issues that aligns with your views. So that's all we're doing. And so I think in terms of data protection of user, we actually don't have any data of user to protect. And then I think you bring up a very good point about how do we make sure or encourage the youth of Indonesia to get out of their algorithmic bubble, because I think that the algorithm can further fuel polarization because you keep on just consuming information that confirms your biases. And so I think that's one of the reasons why Bijak Memilih, we created it outside of social media. So it's an independent website where we encourage, although we campaign for it through social media very actively. So we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, Twitter. And so we encourage people to go there. And so that's one of the sources that if they open that website, they're exposed to the multifaceted information on political parties in Indonesia and on the political processes themselves. And so that can sort of like be a stepping stone for them to break out of that bubble. And I think lastly, it's about freedom of speech. I think in Indonesia right now, you mentioned hate speech, like how far you can go, or being oppressive like minority groups, for example. And I think in Indonesia, our problem is quite different in the sense that our freedom of speech and expression is not as guaranteed. And this has two sides. First, we have the law itself that is quite multi-interpreted, and this law makes it creates a chill effect to a lot of people, making a lot of people self-censored. And so I think the question in Indonesia about freedom of speech is not only about like the law itself, but how can we create a sufficient and healthy ecosystem so that people use their freedom of speech maximally, they don't self-censor. And it's not only the government side that's the problem, but it's also like there's a lot of citizen versus citizen criminalization of freedom of speech that is accommodated by the state. And so it's in Indonesia, I feel like the issue of freedom of speech is still, we're still on the freedom. We're not yet in like how far is the limitation, but we're still starting, we're barely starting, we're still like, oh, is this okay? Because I think Indonesia, we just had a reformation in 1998. So I think there's still a lot of generational trauma in terms of like freedom of speech and expressing your opinion. I think that's all from me.
Thank you, Abigail. Now inviting Pak Bambang.
Thank you. Very interesting, Abigail. I really appreciate what Abigail has done, because she chose to do this and spend her time there, even though maybe if she spent her time more on Wall Street, she's probably 10 times richer or something like that. So I do appreciate you. But here is the thing. What Abigail does is helping people to choose the best on the menu. But the mother of the political problem in Indonesia is the menu itself. Because you can imagine, in order to be in the menu, the head of Indonesian Senate, Mr. Bambang Susatyo, has openly stated that in order to get re-elected next year, he already budgeted his own personal money of 5 billion rupiah. That means more than 300,000 US dollars. His own personal money. And he said, I think for me that's enough because I'm a very well-known politician. For my friends who are not as well-known as me, at least they need to spend their own money, 10 billion rupiah, which is more than $600,000. Now, on less than 0.1% of Indonesian population has disability. So in order to be on the menu, you have to belong to the top 0.1%. If you belong to 99.9%, there's no chance unless you sell your soul to the oligarchy. You know, you become like, if you pay for me to get elected, then I'll scratch your back. And this is the problem of scratching the back. What do you do if you are elected as member of parliament, or even worse, as regional leader, based on this money financed by the oligarchies? The oligarchies will ask you, create this law that will make me richer, and legally, basically, make my robbing activity now into a legal activity. You know, so for instance, suddenly their concession of coal mine, which supposed to be given back to the state next year, suddenly automatically extended 30 years. Or in the case of the local leader, especially in the places where there are a lot of rainforests and so on, then they say, well, then I can give you concession of this rainforest because I'm the local leader. So it caused the problem of environment, of climate change. So that's why, to me, the problem of politics in Indonesia is not only a problem for us Indonesian, but for the whole world, because it creates worse climate change. You can imagine those oligarchs who own the cement factories. For them, it's cheaper to support the politician and then let them pollute the area than for them to put, all the necessary action to ensure that their companies don't produce, pollution. So a lot of greenwashing in Indonesia. You can make a lot of money by creating a company specializing in greenwashing for them. So this is a problem for the world. I agree with that. Sometimes the biggest source of pollution is poverty. If we can get rid of poverty, less problem for pollution. For instance, right now in Jakarta, we are all screaming about air pollution, mostly because of coal fire plant and also exhaust from car and motorcycles. But if the government decided, okay, we close those dirty coal plant, we use the clean one, but the price of electricity will go up, then people will be on the street. So, and then you say, no, you cannot use your motorcycle to go to work. If you don't give him, public transportation that is cheaper and efficient, then they will say, how can I go to work? So this is, interlock problem. Yeah, but in the end, the real culprit is poverty. But the problem is, we want, of course, to get rid of this poverty, but because this politically is corrupt, what happened is, when we have a good economic growth, like Indonesia is a very good economic growth, is mostly enjoyed by those 0.1% top. And then in order to get a good popularity support, every 3 months we want to do a survey, the government gives this cash to the most poorest. It's only 300,000, which is about what, $20 per family. Then you got all these very poor people give support to you because they got $20 every 3 months per family, because for them it's a big money. So we are trapped into this, and we have to get out of this trap. Otherwise, our environment will get worse, and then the gap between the rich, super rich, and poor getting worse. Then the only option left is social revolution. We don't want to have another social revolution. We have to do something more manageable. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Bambang. I really want to get thoughts from Pak Nyarwi and also Pak Togi, but let me accommodate 2 to 3 more questions from the Indonesian youth now. Please raise your hand in the Zoom. Okay, I see already. These are the delegates in IYDF program. They have gone through some focus group discussions discussing about issues in Indonesia's democracy, and they're in the process of formulating joint statement, by the way, for your information. Okay, I'll call Hotma Samosir and then Ranita. Please keep your questions and comments short so we can accommodate more. Hotma Samosir.
All right, thank you very much. Am I audible, Jenny? Okay, so thank you very much, and it's nice to see you all. So my name is Hotma Samosir from Binjai, Sumatera Utara. I'm interested to give the comment about the oligarchy in the politics. So I would like to share my stories in the local government, because it's a very related with the idea of the oligarchies. Because number one, I think the template and the pattern of our local political candidacy is quite similar. Number one, that the candidate for the mayor or for the region is the person or the kind of the person who have capable, and the candidate from the vice mayor or the vice regency is coming from the oligarchy or the person who have the capital or who have the money. That's the things. But this is the problem why the local government is still having the problem with this particular issue. But what I would like to suggest and I would like to invite to this discussion in this meeting is the idea of the money laundering, because I think this is the problem that would are related with the idea of the local politics. Because I think when I follow the discussion about the money laundering, especially about our how to say fundraising in the campaign, I think the idea of the campaign that already addressed in our regulation, in the regulation number 7 or in the year of the 2017 is still higher than, is still very big money, because in that regulation, I think that the maximum fundraising is 7 billion for the individuals and 25 billions for the corporate. I think this is the big possibility for the every person or the every entities to do the money laundering, because we can collect the money from the everywhere and we only use the single identity for delivering this institution. The problem is we think that the politics is complex, is more complex than that, because we think that the several people, several capital owner will collect their money, but at the end, when the candidate is win and become the incumbent, we think that the power is still distributed into the small piece of cake. So that is the things that I would like to share. So I think this is also one of the recommendations that I need to discuss for this meeting and also for our joint statement is it possible for us to deliver our referendum in our regulations that number one, that the endowment fund or like the fundraising idea should be lower than the 7 billions, is maybe that how for the individual that they only maximum can give the fundraising or give the funding around 1 until 2 billions for the maximum, not until the 7 billions. And for the corporate, I think that it will be less than 5 until 10 billions for delivering the. I think the idea of the number of the money is very significant in order to create the more qualified campaign and more qualified the election, because the smaller number of the money will make people to send the identity, and how the more people should be identified as the the sponsorship of the candidates. So I think this is the things that I would like to share, because in the every news and in every discussion, I think this is still become the kind of the discussion, but there is no any further actions coming from the KPU or Bawaslu regarding about the money laundering issue. I think that's all that I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Hotmasa Mosir. Now go to Ranita.
Hi, thank you, Jenny. Thank you all of the speakers as well. Very comprehensive, very insightful, I find. Just one comment that I would like to share, especially with regards to what Pak Bambang mentioned earlier about the fact that our democracy has basically eroded. By the way, thank you so much, Pak Bambang. I know your life story and trajectory. It puts me instantly as your big fan. And yeah, so talking about the erosion of our democracy, Pak Bambang, then my question actually, the first thing came to my mind is actually why our democracy is eroding, right? Not only in Indonesia, but in the context of, like the global society. Now, one of the things that I'm actually, it keeps kind of passing through again and again in my head is the fact that probably the reason why democracy is eroding is because it kind of fails to stay relevant. I'm not really saying about the context. I'm really saying about the implementation of the system is probably a little irrelevant, right? And because as all of us and how we develop and how the global society, socio-political economy develops, I do believe democracy has to develop and evolve as well, to fit into the context. Now, if you talk about one of the critique, right, of Western concept of democracy is this dichotomization of the concept of government versus civil society. And even in all our discussions just now, how many times we mentioned civil society and civil society. I do think, Pak Bambang, that, this is just my view, and I would love to hear your view on this. This is just my view that this concept of civil society nowadays is actually irrelevant, because what happens today is there is no more civil society, and what we have now is political society. Why? Because by emphasizing on civil society, we are actually disacknowledging the fact that our society are actually political. We do have political objective, we do have political interest, and we are politically inclined, right? But by saying that civil society and civil society, I feel that this kind of implant some sort of cognitive or intellectual perception in the people, themselves, that, I'm actually irrelevant to politics. Like, probably I'm not allowed to engage. Okay, I'm quite distant from the politics. I just feel that there is there's always power and meaning behind the terminology, the concepts that we are actually adopting, and I think this is important to change this mindset in our today's society. And because I do feel that by let's say changing this concept of civil society to political society, we could actually help to alleviate political exclusivity. The fact that everybody can actually participate inclusively in politics, and even to talk about, the marginalized group, the minority, their identity as LGBTQ, non-Muslim and Muslim within the context of Indonesia are not anymore relevant, which is great, because all of these identity politics are irrelevant, right, when it comes to actually vouching for more inclusive political participations. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on this, Pak Bambang, and I would love to hear more views from you, especially maybe there's more solution, because my solution is more in terms of cognitive, psychological, intellectual terminologies that we use, but probably there's more kind of practical issues from you, how to actually make our democracy stay relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Radita. Now, one more before I go to the panelists, Pamungkas. Please keep your question short. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Good afternoon for all the speakers, and thank you very much for the interesting discussion. I want to ask a question that I think it is based on one of the most fundamental problem of our democracy, that is the dilemma between policy cycle versus political cycle. We know that in policy cycle, for long-term policy, it needs more, at least 15 years of implementation or maybe more. For a long-term policy, something like for industrial policy, if we want to upgrade our industry from heavy industry to light industry, or one other example is MP3AE, it needs 15 years of implementation. But on the other hand, we have a political cycle that is for every leadership term, there is only 5 years. So for every political party, if they want to implement or accomplish the implementation of long-term policy, they need to win at least 3 elections consecutively. But it is, of course, very difficult, especially because we have the term limit. There is only 2 terms of leadership in office. And I think it is one of the reasons why for the recent years we face several notions from several politicians that they want perpanjangan masa jabatan presiden or something like that, because and the reason they propose is we want to deliver the accomplishment of long-term policy implementation and so on. And I think it is also the reason behind our dependence on the cheap money came from raw material export and so on, and why we experience the industrialization, because to build our industry we need more than 15 years, and if we keep independent with raw materials export like coal export and so on, we need only I think under 5 years to get the money. And yeah, every single politician I think want to keep in power, and they will choose to use that kind of dirty industry to finance their I think run for election. So my question is, what do you think about this kind of dilemma between policy cycle and political cycle, and how to maintain that on the one hand we make sure that the implementation of long-term policy can be accomplished, while at the same time we keep our leadership circulation keep on place. I think that's the question that I want to ask. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Pamungkas. It's actually a good question. I'd like to get Pak Togi to answer first. The first one that was coming from the Hotma Samosir was about the financial endowment and also the money laundering. It would be great if you can answer on this one or other questions also. But yeah, I'd like to get your thought on this one particularly.
Sure. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Hotma. So I think your question, Hotma, revolves around oligarchy and then money laundering, and then it narrowed down to whether or not we can entertain the idea of rearranging, reformulating the limits of contributions to political parties, which is now stands at around 7 billion and 5 billion. So I think, first of all, we have to acknowledge that my idea is we have to acknowledge how powerful political parties have become in the Indonesian system. Dare I say, probably political parties have become the most powerful institution in Indonesia. So not only do they have the power to effectively select presidents, they also have the power to essentially elect two other branches of government, right? So if you want to become a Supreme Court judge in Indonesia, you need to go through a fit and proper test through the parliament. And I think we've seen instances of candidates for Supreme Court judges providing bribery to parliament members, one notably being given in a restroom in the parliament building, right? So that's the judiciary branch of government. The executive branch, they effectively have a monopoly on it, because the law essentially states if you want to become a president, then you have to go through a political party. The law also says if you want to run for parliament, you have to go through a political party. So given what is going on and given how much power that they have, I think we should go even further than your idea of decreasing funding or decreasing amount of contribution so that we can encourage more transparency. At least that's what I am getting from the question. So I think we have to rethink the idea, the authority of political parties in Indonesia. Through what means? I can think of two ways. The first one is we have to introduce and encourage the possibility of someone going through elections, going for parliament, not through political parties. So we have to encourage and enable the possibility of independent candidates, be it at the level of parliament or be it at the level of the executive office. Right now, the trend is actually going backwards. The trend is now they want to increase presidential threshold. It now stands at 20%. They want to increase it even. So I think if we go down this road, we will end up with a concentration or elimination of political parties into one singular monolith, for example. So I think we should entertain and explore the idea of independent candidacy. Right? This has been explored with Pak Ahok in 2017. He wanted to run not via a political party, but a group of volunteers. This did not work out. So that's the first idea. The second idea is I agree, we have to increase what Pak Bambang is saying and what the other panelists are saying. We have to increase state funding to political parties to increase, to decrease the reliability or propensity to conduct corruption. But on the other side of that coin, right, so this is regulated specifically. There's a 2018 government regulation that specifically regulates state budget assistance to political parties. But what is missing, and I think this is key, in that piece of legislation is the responsibility. So if you are afforded a significantly higher assistance from the state budget, then it's logical to then request for a higher threshold of liability or responsibility. We should, right now, as it stands, the 2018 law only requires these political parties to provide an annual report of how the 1,000, which is now has been increased to 7,000 per vote, is being used. If you go to these political party websites, they have audited financial statements, but they're not detailed. They're not that detailed, even though they are audited. Right? So I think if we are going to increase the funding from state budgets, we have to also increase the responsibility. Earlier this year, there have been calls to treat corporations, to treat political parties as corporations, meaning that if we can help corporations to be accountable for criminal acts of corruption, we can then explore the idea of implementing the same standard to political parties. So if you have a minister from a certain political party or a parliament member from a certain political party conducting corruption, and the flow of money is specifically used or put back into the political party, or even worse, it's done under the direction, right, of that political party, then that political party as an entity needs to be held accountable. If we hold political parties, if we can give them a sanction, if you do not propose a presidential candidate on this election, you will be sanctioned. You will not be able to enter into the next election. If we can provide that sanction, that type of sanction to them, what's stopping us from introducing other sanctions, especially ones that relate to corruption? If we can introduce theories of alter ego, corporate culture in criminal acts conducted by corporations, we can introduce a certain culture or a certain standard in political parties in Indonesia. So if we are going to increase assistance to them, we also have to increase their transparency, reliability, right? So I think we should not just stop at, okay, we're decreasing the limit so that you can be more transparent. I don't think that's going to stop. And we also need to look at comparisons in the United States with the Citizens United case, right? Whereby it's a different type of oligarchy in the United States. It's all business interests, it's all lobbying, whereby funding to a political party is considered free speech. So I think if we go down the route of thinking only on capital contribution, I think there is a risk that we would go down the Citizens United route in the United States as well. So I think that would be my answer to Hotman. Jenny, I'll leave the other two questions, Ranita on participation and Pamungkas on the policy and political cycle, to the other panelists, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Togi. Yes, I would like to direct the third question coming from Pamungkas to Pak Nyarwi here, talking about the dilemma between maintaining the continuity of long-term vision and policies and seeing it in the context of the limit of leadership term that we have. So, Pak Nyarwi?
Yeah, about this dilemma, I think I want to say in this way. Actually, when we are living in democratic system, or when we are follow democratic system, I think the policies should be based on the voice of the people and formulated based on what best for the people. But the people in this regard, when we are understanding the interests of the people, we should make sure that there is no biases in there. If we are talking like, for example, particular direction of the development, economic development, of type of economic development, we should check first who get the benefit most from policy. If this policy should merely give it some advantages to the rich community or the big business owners groups, for example, I think why do we need to make this policy? I mean, for long term, so people have no benefit from this policy. So actually, we should be careful when defining what kind of policy needed by the people, because people also need to be heard when the government propose the policy. Sometimes this mega project that merely represent the will of the political elite and the interests of political elites, not for common people. So, like I agree with what Pak Harimurti said, that the main problems, I think, the poverty. As long as we couldn't solve those things, I mean, upgrade the level of most of Indonesian people, economics income, for example, we have still encountered similar problem that the democratic process not merely just an instrument to gain or to achieve the goal of some political elite. This I think we have the problem about the middle class community as a pillar of democracy. We need to develop like a more sustainable, independent middle class that could they could also voices some expectation or aspiration of the people. So, and yeah, I agree. The policy, long-term policy, is needed as long as this long-term policy formulated based on the best for the people interest. Right now, the government said that we have a demographic bonus, for example. But if we just merely see the people or democratic young generation as democratic bonus, I think they're seen as just consumer. I think it is dangerous. I mean, when we need to reformulate this policy or to reframe this policy, that when we are developing long-term policy, we should make sure that how the people get benefit from this policy. And sometimes I still see that the elite, also the government, did not propose a clear paradigm of a policy. Say, for example, we expect that like a long time ago, Habibie say about Habibie Nomik, for example. What about Jokowi Nomik? And what about the presidential candidate right now? We never heard about this. Is there any Anies Nomik or Ganjar Nomik, Prabowo Naik, how they propose the indicator to develop this country for a long time? If they give us a clear map and how the most of majority of Indonesian people get benefit from this, I think it's no problem if we support this long-term policy, even as part of the campaign platform that they propose in the head of the election. It doesn't matter. But we have learned from Jokowi era. We never heard about Metal City long time ago during the election campaign, but it suddenly come up, and then state project or government new project, and people also have no choice. Even I think this is just example. So some policy can be made as a long-term policy once it approved by majority of the people. If needed, we need a referendum. Do we need really, for example, new capital cities should have a right to vote? If majority of people then vote to support this thing, that's okay. And the government also should give some clear explanation or a map how the people get benefit, young generation or young voter, because right now in head of election, the majority of voter under 40 So Prabowo also quite often said that the future is yours. How can to the voter? How can the voter really have something for this country? That I mean, they have power in determining the direction of the country, or have right in doing business, similar equality opportunity in the doing business, or taking or developing some any entrepreneurship program, or even like empowering program to the people. So all of those things still blur. We have no clear, I mean, a map and direction how to serve or to give the best option for the voter. That's all my statement. Thank you. I do apologize because I have another meeting. Thank you so much, all guys.
Thank you, Pak Nyarwi, for your joining. Thank you, Pak Nyarwi.
Bambang.
Well, I like
So,
to.
yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, Pak Nyarwi. I'd like to give the floor to Pak Bambang, but Pak Bambang, allow me to just throw one closing questions for every panelist to answer in a really concise way. This is also for Pak Bambang to answer to what Ranita have commented, but just one question to close. Everyone get to speak 1 minute to answer this. My question is, how worried should we be about Indonesia's democracy today? How worried? Because we know we don't have the memories, the youth of back then, the new order, and then 25 years of reformasi. We also have like just little memories, let's say, and not so direct experience. That's first. And second, yes, we are thankful that we still survive, the democracy still survive, but we should not take it for granted. What would you say about how worrying Indonesia's democracy today is overall after our discussion? And I think this is a good way to close our discussion as well. So I'll go to Pak Bambang, and then Abigail, and then to Pak Togi.
Well, I think I'm worried enough to keep saying critical thing and what to do, especially regarding the financial of political parties, which need to be, because it is the mother of all the problem. But I'm not that worried because I still see my friend like Faisal Basri, like Rocky Gerung, like, you know, Her Subeno, they still can speak freely. Yeah, they might be attacked by the buzzers, or like my friend also, Refli Harun, yeah, they still can speak openly, critically, and even though maybe they are attacked digitally, they are attacked, but at least they survive. So for me, they are kind of what you call it, canary in the cage. As long as the canary live, I'm not that worried. But if they start to put them in jail, then I think it's time for me to go to the street and topple the government.
Thank you, Pak Bambang. Perhaps your comment on Ranita's comment earlier, you could text us and I'll send to
Okay,
Ranita.
I can a little bit on Ranita,
Okay,
yeah, just 30 seconds. Okay, on Ranita, I think the name of civil society is actually the other name for active participant of the people, rakyat yang berpartisipasi. But the sad thing is, in Indonesia now, it's still very small group. They might be very loud, but compared to the reality, the real power, it's still very small. But I'm glad that they're at least loud. So they, you know, they're heard. Because the number of participation is actually meaning how big is our social capital. The more people participate in democracy, the better our democracy, the better our social capital. Right now, it's still very small, but fortunately, it's still growing. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Bambang. Abigail, how worried are you representing the youth here?
Very interesting question. I think compared to the other panelists, I'm not that much of an expert and be able to assess all the necessary information required for me to actually give like an accurate measurement of how worried we should be or how worried I should be. But from my limited observation and my limited contribution so far, there is concern, and I think that it's very valid that we need to be aware of the threats of democracy and of the real red flags that has been showing. But I'm very hopeful because obviously if I'm not hopeful, I won't be in the sphere doing what I'm doing right now. And I think pessimism won't really get us far. But I think if the youth are hopeful and if we can be hopeful in a realistic kind of way, I think that would be very useful. And from my experience, the fact that I can publish the Bijak Memilih website without any attack so far, and it has been actually well received by both the government and by the political actors and by the society in general, I think it's a very good sign that our democracy is maybe a lot more mature than I thought it was, because we were actually very scared at first before releasing, because it does contain like corruption track record and things like that. So that's one. And I think, yeah, like I read somewhere that one of the biggest downside of corrupt institution is that the country loses a lot of its youth idealism. And I have seen a lot of my friends who are very young but has their idealism died prematurely, I would say. And I think it is our role in saying that, hey, I think there's still hope, and it is important for us to encourage and to protect that youth idealism in protecting democracy.
Totally agree. Thank you. Now, last but not least, Pak Togi.
Okay, so two things. Oh, no, two fronts. How worried am I? Democracy, we can look at it as a form, meaning that it's a way for people to cast their vote. So if we look at it procedurally, then I'm not that worried. They'll keep that methodology for the foreseeable future. And again, for our German friends, they're probably tired of hearing this, but lest we forget, Adolf Hitler was elected democratically. So he came to power democratically. He was elected. What I'm worried is the substance of the democracy. Democracy has many pillars. And I think the way we're seeing it right now, many of these pillars are being attacked, if not slowly, but directly being. Lest we forget the attacks on Najwa Shihab and her team, the hacking of her team when she was reporting on certain issues. The other pillar of democracy is rule of law. And I think we've discussed in this seminar and all the other seminars and in Pak Bambang's discussions as the legal reform team that there is an attack on rule of law. So I think if the question is, am I worried that we're not gonna elect people directly? No, I'm not worried. I think they're gonna keep that methodology. But substantively, I'm worried what that means, right? Because what is our goal? If our goal is only enabling people to vote, I don't think there's an issue. But if the goal is to ensure public welfare, ensure a thriving, advanced society, I think there are threats towards that. But having said that, from the three candidates, my personal view is from all the presidential candidates, including the incumbent right now, President Jokowi, I don't think they have any bad intentions towards Indonesia. It's the way they're doing it, their vision of the way they're doing it. Jokowi is very obviously trying to make us into a prosperous nation by way of investment. Because the way to make the country rich is, there's a lot of ways. And President Jokowi, I think, is doing it through investment. The other way of doing it is taxing people to increase public state income. How do you do it? You do it either through investment or taxing people. So I think this is basically many different ways. And I disagree with Professor Nyarwi. It's clear. If you look at Anies, for example, he has repeatedly mentioned Thomas Piketty's book, Capital. And Thomas Piketty's views is kind of left-leaning. It's a lot on taxation. Ganjar has talked a lot about digitalization and budgeting efficiency as ways to increase state income. Prabowo has mentioned numerous times about human resources building, right? Food security and investment as well. So I think there is certain ways we can ascertain. So again, going back, am I worried? Procedurally, no. Substantively, I am a bit worried. Thank you. And yes, Pak Bambang, correct your comment on that. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Togi. That's a good way to close our discussion. So thank you very much, Abigail, Pak Bambang, Pak Togi, and Pak Nyarwi, who just left for another meeting. It was a very insightful discussion. I believe all of us here have learned. Lastly, if I could say a thing or two, also as a young generation, we really must not take it for granted, even though we see things are all right. Sometimes we do see some concerning headlines and all that, but we still, just chilling here and not really not being that worried. Then it's like Pak Bambang said, once it's taken away, it's really hard to get it back. So once it becomes a law, then it's really hard to get it back. And we really need to be the warriors to protect democracy once again. And this initiative, one of them by FPCI, Indonesian Youth Democracy Forum, is one of our initiative to bring the discourse up on the table, because somebody needs to bring this up to discuss among the youth. And I really admire as well the delegates that are joining us here, discussing and also being curious, continue to learn and having a healthy debates on how can we move forward to strengthen Indonesia's democracy. So once again, thank you very much for all of our panelists. I'll give the floor back to the MC Dito.
Thank you so much, Jenny. As we come to the end of this event, I would like to thank all of our speakers and delegates for their valuable contribution. Your insights and perspective have enriched our understanding of the challenges and opportunities facing Indonesia democracy in the 21st century. And on behalf of the organizer, I would like to express our gratitude to all of you for joining us today. We hope this event has been informative and it has been inspired all of you to take action to strengthen Indonesia democracy. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, Jenny, Pak Bambang.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.